Noah Smith, coming at you live.
Hi! This is DM Me, the show where I have convinced 3 seasoned DMs to sit in a room with me and teach me how to DM. And eventually, I will have the torturous job of actually DMing for you guys. So, let's start out with...
Wait, torturous for who?
Everyone. Let's be honest.
At least you're inclusive.
Let's start with so today's episode is going to be on the basics of role playing. So in that spirit, who have you decided to be today?
I've decided to be, sadly, myself.
Your name is Sadly?
Yes, myself.
For those of you who don't know, that does sound like a character that would be in one of Casey's games. No, please introduce yourselves.
DM Casey, I run yet another adventuring party, and I'm glad to be here talking about role-playing.
Yeah.
Yes, and I am Brianna Baca, go by Bree, and I play in Collad and sometimes make some fun drink videos.
Charlie Spicer, resident Grey Dog gamer, and I help behind the scenes on Collad. And I'm here on this show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive into it. All right, so role-playing. What is it? And is it kinky?
Oh, well.
There has to be a lot of conversation about it.
Yeah.
Everybody at the table has to be okay with it, but in all seriousness, yes, it can be.
Well, since I didn't okay it with Ian beforehand, let's stick to the non-kinky version of roleplay.
What is roleplay? Being able to step into shoes that you made yourself most of the time and get to discover along with a whole bunch of people at a table building a story together. It's the reason that I do this. If there was no role-playing, then it'd pretty just much be a bar and chips game.
Yeah.
Just rolling dice and knocking over things. Yeah. Role-playing's why I'm here.
Awesome.
Yeah. Role-playing is just pretend. It's acting. It's, like you said, stepping into the shoes of somebody else, a different backstory, a different mindset, people with different troubles, or maybe troubles similar to your own. It can also be a really good way to work through things that you need to work through in a very safe environment, where the consequences aren't very lasting. So roleplay can be anything from just fun to cathartic therapy.
Yeah.
It's acting without a stage. It's basically you and basically 5 friends that get together to go ahead and have a shared hallucinogenic experience, possibly without any substances involved.
Never.
And yeah, but like what Bree said, basically you get to live a fantastic life that's not your own. It's basically what we did as kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, back when we were like younger, and there was no one to tell us that you were weird for doing it.
Younger.
And
Whoa, you hit me with flashbacks.
I remember I was this in 1st grade, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
3rd grade, it's like, who would win in a fight? Thor versus Hulk? Well, let's go ahead and have this out.
Yeah.
But now there's a dice mechanic to help it resolve it, as opposed to who's read the most issues of FUM.
Well, that's because there's always the kid that said, well, I've got a shield.
I've got a shield, and you're like, well, I've got a shield breaker.
It has to be order.
Well, I'm invisible. Well, I can see your feet.
I can see invisibility.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of working through things, I have the tragic infliction that I love role-playing way more than combat. Am I broken?
No. You're the most dangerous kind of player.
All right.
Because you don't abide by the rules. When someone really loves role playing and they're there to role play, you can't. A lot of times it's your friends that you're playing with, but if they're a good role player, you can't expect your friend to do what they'd always do because they're not your friend at that moment.
Yeah.
They're Farfignugal, the barbarian. They're the dangerous elf with a knife. They're a dude who works in accounting. Whatever game you're playing.
Yeah. I think nothing is wrong with you, but I'm also biased because role-playing is my favorite thing about D&D and any sort of TTRPG in general. I love the opportunity to play pretend, to expand the story to have those really fun interactions, because what I find most of the time, while you can have really cool moments in combat, the things that I remember the most are the RP scenes. Because that's where, backstories can come out, or there can be character tension, or maybe character romance might blossom from those. It's 0 to 100 can happen, and everything in between in those RP scenes. So, no, I don't think you're broken, because if you are, then I am, and I don't want to be broken.
All right.
You're broken like me. I'm actually going to say that. Because look at how many combat sections are in these games and how much detail they give to it. And then role-playing is kind of the afterthought. That's what you're supposed to do when you're not using the core middle section of rules.
Yeah.
But as Bree said, that's the most memorable part.
Yeah.
That's what actually adds meat and gravity to the story, is the roleplay for it. I mean, you can have all these great, awesome combat bits, but going back to our previous episode with this, it's got to be rooted in a plot. It's got to be rooted in character, and that's what the players bring to the table. And if you are a role player, you're who I want at my table, because you're going to feel me. Your enthusiasm for your character is going to be the stuff that excites my brain pattern and wants to go ahead and write more.
Yeah.
So
Thrill us, Noah.
Thank you. I'm here to perform.
jazz hands, do it. Yes.
So, on that note, as a DM, more specifically, or GM, or whatever you are, storyteller,
Keeper of secrets.
how do
Master of Ceremonies.
not that one? How do you make role playing feel natural for your players? How do you make it not feel forced?
That's going to actually have to spin on how they want to roleplay. Actually, this is something that's come up with the groups that I play across. Is you'll have folks that really want to get into character, and they're going to be the these and thous guy. They're going to immediately adopt an accent or a dialogue or a cadence when they're in character versus not. And then you have the folks that will basically tell you, well, my character is going to go and see what he can find around town. And you've got to respect both of those, because they're both engaged in your plot. Yeah. You may like the Shakespearean guy, but the guy is more reserved, I guess. Is not as out there as much, is still in your game, and he's still going to give you stuff with it. Mm-hmm. I had the pleasure of running for one such player, and they were escaping from a prison. And he says to me, they were all chained to a wall, but after they broke the links, he goes, "Is the chain unattached now? Can I take that with me?" It's like, yeah. So now one of them's armed. So it's just their mind's working. It's just not as boisterous, but it's still there, and you've got to basically make them feel welcome, regardless if they're actually throwing the Shakespearean speech or if they're just basically giving the safe accounting code. Yeah,
and that's what that goes into a little bit of what I would say is, whenever I'm DMing for someone brand new and they really have a hard time getting into that first person and talking like in character, I always say, hey, you don't have to do that. It took me almost a decade to get comfortable just jumping into first person. For the longest time, I was describing things that my character would do in third person. Yeah. Even conversations, I would say things like, well, she kind of says something sort of along the lines of this, and with this sort of weight behind it. And if it was something that, I needed to roll for, like an intimidation, then I would roll for that. But otherwise, I would still be describing in third person. And it's just one of those things that takes some time to get used to, because if you don't come from an acting background, jumping into talking in the first person can feel really weird and really uncomfortable and scary.
Yeah, huh. I just jump right into first person every time. The way I try to make the roleplay feel more natural is I just notice if I'm able to bring a certain level of caliber of the roleplay with energy, it seems much more natural for people to wake up. Because when you're playing a D&D game, you're playing it with people that you know very well. So sometimes you might have an amazing role player, but it's just not his day. And he's not going to be speaking up so much. And you have to be able to respect that as well. And be able to put out a level of energy. And then tailor that back to the player's needs. So that they can really explore the story in the manner that they find best. And yeah, I've encountered players that only do things and describe things in the third person. And they're always the ones that end up surprising me the most. That are having a level of reactiveness to their environment that's not just simply a social or dialogue level.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I can speak for with Casey with our game last week. I came into it I was like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm not ready for this. And you pushed so much energy out that it got me into it immediately, and I was able to respond to it. So I definitely think that helps. But I obviously am more prone towards doing that anyway in the first place. But I think, if you do have a person or an individual who is really struggling, or just doesn't really have it in them, then I think that it can be, you can feel like you're not including them.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I remember as a new player, and still every once in a while it comes across, is that, like, if I'm playing a character that is strong, I don't have to be strong. But if I'm playing a character that's charismatic, I all of a sudden have to figure out.
It is the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
Being a player that likes to play faces 80% of the time that I have a character.
Yeah.
It is the bane of my existence. Because it's like, why do I have to talk pretty? And why are you not prompting me for roles?
Yeah.
But they get to be super strong and intelligent. And you keep relying on their dice, but for me, I have to talk pretty. And so in that case, if you are in my shoes, ask for roles.
Yeah.
Ask for roles. Prompt roles yourself. You do not always have to rely on the GM to prompt for roles. If you feel like you're being, like, unfairly treated in that sense, be like, well, why can't I roll persuasion?
Yeah.
Why does it matter? Like, I'm all about, getting into the role play of trying to persuade a pirate king to, like, hire you. But that shouldn't be on Bree's ability to form a coherent persuasion, thought. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, it's not your story. It's your character.
Yeah.
You're along for the ride.
Yeah.
You're piloting it. But
But we also have this idea that basically charisma means you're this extroverted person that's basically always out there.
Yeah.
You're like this David Bowie on way too much cocaine that's basically, hello, everyone! And if we look at fiction, Batman's got a high charisma.
Yeah.
And he hardly says anything.
Yeah.
Charisma is more a force of personality, the way that I think about it.
Yeah, so you could play that. I mean, I would love to actually see someone play a bard as basically a slam poet. Or I would love to see a bard as basically Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Someone like that basically is a motivational speaker who actually says it with words.
Yeah.
Rather than actually gets up there and strums and does the whole, woo, thank you, Detroit Rock City! No.
Yeah. I definitely Sable, my character in Yet Another Adventure, has moments where, depending on the night, where I feel like more a motivational speaker. But I do think that, so bringing that back to being a DM or GM, how do you make sure to give the space to somebody who's trying to play a high charisma character, but also not make them feel like they're pressured to have to do that every single time? Because
that's a great question. I mean,
and I think it might not be something that we have an exact answer for, because I think it's a really hard balance.
It's up there. Yeah, I know. Actually, my cousin who I roleplay with is like that a lot. He will actually go ahead and say, it's like, well, my character's this way. I gave them I did a one shot that wound up actually taking off and becoming a whole campaign. And he was playing a character that was like based off of Patrick Jane's character on The Mentalist, or the character from The Mentalist, who's this very extroverted showman that's also incredibly smart. And Chip's like, I don't have this charisma, I don't have this level of social skill, but my character does.
Yeah.
And as a GM, my bit is to basically is being a bit of an extrovert myself, it's basically what to do. It's like, well, this might be what you might consider, this might be this, and give him some nudges. But as Bree's saying, you give them the roles for that. Because again, this is this character, not him.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't have to be punished because he hasn't went to all the social events. He as a player isn't this guy that goes out and is actually highly social.
Yeah.
So let his character go ahead and do that. And that's what the roles are for. That's why you've got a skill interaction or charisma or persuasion.
Yeah.
And I think going off of your question of how do you make space, patience. Patience is key, because I have a friend who's pretty soft-spoken and tends to kind of sit in the background and let everybody speak first, and they have really good ideas, but they're really uncomfortable playing social characters. Love you, Morgan. But they've been stepping out of their comfort zone and wanting to play social characters.
Yeah.
And you just have to be patient because sometimes, the player will want to do something, but they're thinking about how they want to go about it.
Yeah.
And so you have to take time to pause and to say, do you need some time?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk it through before you make a decision?
That's good.
And again, it all comes down to communication.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's going to come up on every episode of this and practically every question, but like communication is key to a successful TTRPG.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Because the people that are going to be role-playing in their characters engaged, they're going to do that naturally almost every time. That's how they want to play. Making sure that you slow down and give time to prompt or ask specifically, clearing all the other space of all these other ideas everyone else is throwing out the table to make sure that everyone is heard, and that everyone's ideas are really considered with the same weight. That's very important.
And I want to note that communication isn't just verbally communicating.
Mm-hmm.
It is watching body language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you have a group at the table that are really excited about something and making a plan about like who's going to go talk to the guard and yada yada yada, and you see the face character who's shy and meek keep doing this, say, okay guys, we need to bring it down. So and so, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And use that DM power to bring focus back to the table, but then also for those people that are a little meek or like don't want to interrupt on the more extreme side of things to where they never get to say a word,
Yeah.
help them.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point too, that we as a channel, and really any channel that's on YouTube, are not exactly always the best example for a home game all the time. When we're running on here, we have to keep the pacing up because you guys are watching. And also we're all cast to be really extroverted, really like RP people. But when you're at home, I think playing a game, you can create space for your friends that might be one of the best moments of their play life. I mean, I think giving someone the opportunity who sees themselves, who's been told their whole life, oh, you're not charismatic, you're not that person.
Yeah.
And if you give them the space to pretend to be a person who is charismatic, it can be very therapeutic for them and give them a space to really get out of that mold that they've been told they've been in their entire life. That's something you can do at home as a really big opportunity, and is something that we don't get to display very often here. But that's okay. It's a different arena, and I just wanted to make sure that was something that our viewers knew, is that when you watch Critical Role or you watch this or you watch anything, there are minor differences between how that should be and how your home game should be.
Yeah, it's entertainment versus friends around a table.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Getting back to the questions, unless you guys had anything else to say about
No,
that.
thank you, Noah, for bringing
Yeah,
that
thank
up.
you.
So if we already talked about this a little bit, but let's get a little specific. If we have a player who's struggling with role playing, what are some very specific tools you can give them to help to bring them out of their shell?
That's a hard one on that one. That again, patience goes with that.
Yeah.
And this word gets overused. Not so much safe space, but basically let them feel mentally comfortable there. Again, we're gaming with our friends, and nobody knows how to rib you like your friends, but also no one knows how to support you like your friends.
Yeah.
And get everybody to buy in. I mean, if Bree's playing basically a character with a 500 IQ, then we all have to accept the fact that in this playing character, she is the smartest woman in the world. So if she says, this is the best plan, our characters can't go, well, I don't think that's the case. It's more like, okay, cool, you've thought about that.
Yeah.
Nice, we're backing her play because she obviously thought of that. And you do that. You encourage them to basically make these risks.
I don't know. It might be hard to accept that Bree is only at a 500 IQ. That seems a little low for her.
Fair enough.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good thing, just like creating verisimilitude with the archetypes that you have at the table. A specific tool that I use is something called character exercises. And I usually do them at the beginning of session and at the end of session. And so it's usually questions of, like, what are your characters doing in this specific scenario? So, for example, I recently ran a Strixhaven game. I guess I do run D&D.
Oh, yep.
Whoa!
All this time I've been saying I only run World of Darkness, but I just recently started a Strixhaven game. So, anyway, I'm running a Strixhaven game, and we got to their first weekend. And I was like, what do you guys do during your weekend? Based off of your wisdom modifier and your constitution modifier, you only have so many action points that you can spend for your weekend, just representing physical stamina and then mental stamina, like spoons, from spoon theory. And so I went through it with everybody, and I said, okay, what are the things that you do with your weekend, and what do you do with your weekend? And it created a really, really good moment where they all decided that they were going to study. And so then they made a study group together, and it just, and then they had opportunities to role play with each other because they all chose the same activity to do. And I was like, well, you're all studying, have at it. I'm going to step away from the table for a little bit, role play amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
And so I do those character exercises to get them thinking about their character, like get in the headspace. And then I leave on a character exercise, usually themed as like a learning thing, like what did your character learn this session, or like what was the most impactful thing that happened this session to your character. And sometimes I tack on XP to that. And so I'll be like, if everybody participates in the character exercise, you all get inspiration for next session, or you get an extra XP, for participating in the character exercise.
Yeah. I have to stress your point that patience is a lot of times what it takes, especially when you're starting out a brand new game. I've been role-playing for as long as I can remember. And I'm the type of person that if I'm going to be playing a character, then I'm going to spend at least 2 days researching into them, building every part that's not just on the mechanics. But it's so strange that even, no matter how much work I put into a character, once I'm at the table and surrounded by everyone else's ideas, most of the time, I suddenly feel dwarfed. I feel like I don't know who I'm playing yet. That, I have all these pieces of an idea, but they don't feel real. Because now I'm seeing real people start to merge through my friends, through other player characters.
Yeah.
I think even for really experienced role players, it takes a few sessions to really find who you're playing in a game.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and that's part of the fun for me of starting a new session or a new game is, and it's why I do typically create a new character for every game, is that I'm like, I get to discover who this character is as I go along. The danger in that is every once in a while as I'm discovering it, I'm like, I hate playing this character. I guess it's too much. I outplay myself, right? I'm like, well, no, this character is this way. But I hate it. I also find it's way easier to back to the idea of you have the high charisma. It's way easier to play a character that has a lower stat than you, like your real life stat, right? Like if you're a relatively relatively engaged person in the world, your intelligence score is probably decent. It's way easier to play somebody with a really low intelligence score. It's way easier to play somebody with a really low charisma score. I have
to say, it's almost way more fun too.
And it can be so much fun. It really it can. I mean, Charlie has seen me at my highlight on playing a really not bright character.
But the thing is, of that campaign, we played a ETU campaign. East Texas University, and you'd sold your intelligence as low as it was, but regardless, you were still saying some pretty darn witty lines. Like, was it you were almost recruited for the basketball team because football team because your guy's like this huge kind of sturdy brick house. And he says, "Oh no, my parents said if I take one more hit, I'm going to be a vegetable."
That was a really fun game, and I hope to bring to you guys some of my sci-fi kind of stuff soon as a player. We're gonna have a cyberpunk game soon, which will be fun. Noah loves sci-fi.
Have you played Eclipse Phase?
I haven't played Eclipse Phase.
We should talk after this.
I haven't played a whole lot of role-playing sci-fi, but it is my genre. Like, if I'm going to choose anything besides Lord of the Rings versus something sci-fi, then I'm going to choose sci-fi. I still love Lord of the Rings, but in any case, back to the questions. Sorry, guys. I do have to ground us every once in a while. How do you all integrate role-playing into combat? Since we have to do combat, how do we integrate some role-play into it?
I think I mentioned it before. Having monsters act like they have real things that they care about. There's a great book called "The Monsters Know What They're Doing," that ends up going into like not just why a creature that is feeding off of carrion is in a dungeon, but how it thinks, how it moves about its day, when it sleeps. The world has a backstory as well, not just player characters. I think that a major focus should go towards delving into players, but being able to use role-playing to make, especially with combat, those moments of intensity feel that much more real.
Yeah.
So much more impactful.
And I will say, I'll let you guys answer this, but I just want to throw something in here. I will say, because you do that in Yet Another Adventuring Party, that's what makes me able to, as a bard, when I do Dissonant Whispers, when I do things like that, I'm actually able to take information you've given me about the monster and put it back on them. So it's not just I cast Dissonant Whispers, it's this is what they hear in their head.
Yeah.
This is what they're self-conscious about. So that's what the whispers are, right?
And that creeps me out.
I am not a manipulative person, not at all. Anyway, let's have Bree go.
I guess I had to think a little hard about it because, like, incorporating roleplay into combat, but I think that just speaks to the caliber of people that I play with, in which it's already there to where, like, I don't have to think about it. Like, we don't have the, I roll 20, I hit them, I roll, they hit me, I lose 6. It's already so lively and vibrant and like.
I'm so jealous.
I know. Yeah. I've been spoiled.
That's a good party.
But I don't know. It just being descriptive of what you're doing without taking the spotlight away from everybody. I think is finding a good balance there, because you can say, okay, my character, seeing that happen to her best friend, is going to decide to do this instead of what she was previously thinking of doing, and adding those little insights into what your character is thinking and like why they're doing the things in combat that they're doing. Like, why did she decide to go after that guy instead of that guy? And just like those quick little snippets of character decision insight, I think adds a lot to making it more than just combat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Again, having chatty bad guys is a helpful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said this on the last show, but I'm going to stick to my guns on this, which is basically having having a bandit captain that's going to go ahead and like taunt them or something.
Mm-hmm.
What I was running a Conan game, and it came to odds against basically a caravan master, and we're like, well, you're going to give us our stuff because we need this, or you're going to give us water. It's like, we're not. We barely have enough across the desert, and they forced a conflict, and it was just one of those bits of where the caravan master said, fine, then the sands will drink your blood. And just throwing that line out there, and it's like, all right, cool. But it didn't really need to be this long, eloquent bit, but just having him say
those
that.
little barbs.
Yeah, and just little things like, I think there was a boss battle that was happening in a different game, kind of a swashbuckly one, and the villain couldn't kill the hero. It's like she was making all her deck saves and dodging basically blows left and right. And he gets one hit finally says, die already. and she responds, and I think she critted him on this one, says, you first.
I love that.
And so I inadvertently set up my player for one of the better lines for...
Yeah, that's incredible.
Chatty bad guys.
Yeah, that's all. And they don't have to be like these long, moving speeches, just small phrases or something like that shows that they're invested in their life for this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So. I think one thing that you all do that I don't know that you're conscious of doing, but you do give space for players to tell how they do something, not just that they do something. And that's something that I have picked up from watching you all. So I just wanted to point that out, that is definitely a skill that you all have.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. When somebody attacks you, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, like, yes, absolutely, you can do that. I love that idea. How do you do that? What does it look like?
Yeah.
Describe the scene.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Is basically it's not just me telling a story. You're telling it with me.
Mm-hmm.
All of you are. This is a communal effort, and you should be able to tell me what your character does. You know how agile they are. You know basically that maybe they flip that dagger Winter Soldier style and stick it in.
Oh yeah. Along that, well, perhaps not along that, but just with all this conversation, how do you guys reward role playing with characters? Because combat kind of has various ways to reward combat, right? You beat the bad guy, you could reward XP, they could get loot, but how do you reward role playing?
Bonuses.
Yeah.
Actually, either that or omitting die rolls. Like case in point, if a character gives a good speech
Yes.
and it's moving, it seems basically, if you're on point and you're making your case to the king for why he should send extra forces to the northern front, and you make a very succinct role played out speech, why do I want to undermine that with you rolling a 1 out of 20?
Yeah.
You've already put that effort in. I think that works right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier with the character exercise stuff. But if you want to go more into like XP rewarding, the idea of in World of Darkness, you have things called character aspirations, and it's tied to XP. But in my games, I also do something called character nominations. So outside of what your aspirations were for that game and if you hit them or not, we go around the table at the end of game and give character nominations and say something cool that character did. That person can't talk for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's everybody else saying, I thought this was really cool about your character this session, or this moment was like so character defining. It was super cool. And then we go around the table and do that, and everybody gets an XP based off of that. And then like in the moment, D&D has an inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if somebody says something super funny, I'll be like, that was hilarious, inspiration.
Yeah.
Or if they do something very character defining, inspiration.
Yeah.
So find those things in the different systems you're working in or playing in that reward things like that. Absolutely. That you can give your players those little bits of extra. And if it doesn't exist, make up your own.
Oh yeah. In a non-mechanical aspect of how to reward role-playing. Role-playing largely hinges constantly on choices. It wouldn't be very much fun to just play any sort of type of person if that person doesn't have to be challenged and make choices that rely either on their background, their understanding, their belief, their goals. So one of the easiest ways for being able to reward that, I think, is reflecting their role play back at them through positive change or negative change in the world. If someone's going to go through a ton of effort to try and convince a bunch of spoons that they're actually the mayor, then he should be referenced as the mayor.
Yes, 100%. I love that.
Even if he has to remind you.
But if also you're looking to play, if you're in a unique space where you're being given the trust of being able to play an evil character in a game, or a character that maybe is not as morally aligned with everyone else, I think one of the main reasons of doing that is because you want to see some consequence of your actions in the world that you're playing in.
Yeah.
If you're a bad guy that always gets away with it, then, well, that's no fun.
What's the point?
Yeah,
What's the point?
Well, along with that, this was not a prepared question, but I think it's an important one. How much do you force your players to stick to their alignment that is on their character sheet?
Go, Casey.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yep, same.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Because, and in fact, usually what I feel like is players constantly, they get stuck in a mode of what would my character do in this situation? When it's not how real people react in situations. Real people will do the opposite of what they thought their preconceived notions or beliefs were in a moment where suddenly they're deciding, oh, this person that I didn't trust is falling down a hill and I need to save them.
Yeah.
Well, your character wouldn't save them. And that's surprising. I always feel it's much more there's so much more story in allowing a player to play against their own character's beliefs.
Yeah.
And then as long as you make them have their character question why they did that to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed over time building characters in D&D specifically that, I used to do alignments, and then it just got to the point where every single character I'd build would be chaotic neutral, chaotic neutral, chaotic neutral, because that's what people are. Turns out we are all chaotic neutral.
But going off of that, though, there's actually a level of roleplay that needs to be allowed that alignment wouldn't.
Yeah.
There was a post-apocalyptic game I was running where one of the characters was this very much out for himself survivalist. But I think they'd gotten in a firefight, they got messed up, and these refugees or sort of this garbage town folk had basically drawn them in, or pulled them in and basically patched them up. And there was no reason for them to do. They were put out for food, they were put out for supplies, but it was what they did that was right. Skipping forward a session, the same garbage town gets attacked, and this out for himself guy who was still adamant it's like they were stupid to do this is the first one that runs toward danger to stop them. And that's something that was against everything for his character, but it made sense.
Yeah.
And afterwards I said, so in character, why did you do that? It's like, well, because I don't want to owe him for this. Out of character, why did you do that? It's like, because, damn it, they showed me there was actually something worthwhile in this world. So they get at least one do-over today.
Wow.
I love it.
Yeah.
So to be clear, when you say garbage town, you mean Cincinnati, Ohio, right?
No.
For any of our viewers from either of those cities,
We're not sorry.
We're not sorry. No.
Not at all.
No, especially not Ohio. Bree, did you have anything more to say on that?
I think they hit the nail on the head there with like what beautiful moments can come out of not restricting your players. And that really is what it comes down to, is saying, you wouldn't do that. And it's like, how do you're not me. Like, why are you telling me what I would do? You wouldn't go most people wouldn't go and do that to a person. Yeah. If they're anything worth their salt. Yeah. Why would you do that in a role-playing scenario?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So if you had, if you wanted to, could you make a session of any TTRPG, but specifically D&D or popular RPGs? Could you make an entire session just role playing?
Yes, I do frequently.
Yeah, I've done so frequently.
Yeah. I guess a side question to that then is, how do you know if a session that you thought was going to be all role playing needs to change and there needs to be something else that happens?
Ooh.
Reading the table.
Yeah.
No, being in tune with your players, knowing sort of their tells for being bored or being frustrated.
Yeah.
Part of being a good DM is being a good people person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying that like you have to be a people person to be a DM, but there are certain things that you have to learn.
Yeah.
For me, it was memorizing rules because I'm not a person that can just keep things in my head a lot. I have to reference. But the reading the table, that was jumping into RP. That was the easy thing for me. So everybody's going to have something that they're good at and that they're bad at when they start DMing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that being able to read your players is a skill that a DM should have.
Yeah, they're going to be your barometer for what you need to do for the plot.
Yeah.
If you're actually giving them a data dump and they're looking bored, then it's time for let them actually go ahead and let out some oats.
Yeah.
If they're getting frustrated with a combat, it's like if someone looks like it looks like it's going to start for a confrontation, and you can actually sense that sort of sigh coming up from the table, like, okay, then that's like, and now it's going to be a confrontational role playing game.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it, is to basically judge what they want to do.
Yeah.
And then be malleable to that.
Yeah. Do you think that it's part of that also can be that because it seems like you guys don't face this all that often as pretty skilled DMs, except for Charlie over there. No, but it seems like it's not necessarily something you guys are encountering all the time, and part of that is probably because you guys give clear cues to your players that you guys can do this, but if you want to go more murder hobo here, I can do this. Like, I can meet you there, right? Yeah. Like, so they can do what they need to do. Yeah.
I don't know what else to say besides that.
Actually, it happens frequently.
Yeah.
It happens frequently that's like, I've planned it to do this, and then the player's like, this is what we want to do. And the best thing to do as a GM, or at least the best advice that was ever given to me, was know how your world moves and then let your players move in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there is going to be times, though, where you do have to have a fight. I mean, if you're in a cyberpunk game and you've actually wandered into a rival gang's turf, and they're basically saying, you're going to go ahead and have to ante up something, money, credit, money, credit, or whatnot. Exactly. And except their West Side Stories fought with machine guns. You can't dance fight your way out of this.
Dang.
So yeah, and it's gonna. Well, you could, but yeah. So there are those times where basically you can't get out of that.
Yeah.
And you have to play that through because otherwise you're not true to the plot or the world that the characters are in.
Yeah. I think that one thought that came up into mind as you guys were saying, like read the table and stuff like that. A struggle that can be there for a lot of modern players now is a lot of people are playing over Discord.
Right. Yes.
And it's way harder to know how your player's feeling that day. How like you have no body language whatsoever to know. I mean, I think Charlie, unfortunately, has been subjected to days when we played on Discord where I was just like, I am not in this. I am not here right now. And it's not his fault.
No.
But it was just a day where I was just like, I'm not here for this right now. And I'm not present as present as I want to be. And I think that you always handled it really well in terms of just trudging forward and, not... But... I guess, do you guys have any advice there on ways that you could help to alleviate potential pitfalls of playing over Discord?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of hits on what
or any voice thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that a good indicator is how many phones are at the table of engagement. And so that kind of hits into being checked out at the table. And I might get some flack for this. Obviously, there are exceptions. But in my opinion, audio-only games kills games. And that's because TTRPGs are meant to be a very social and engaging activity. And there's only so much engaging that you can get in audio only.
Yeah.
So I have made the rule for myself to any of my friends that's like, if it's Discord only, I'm not playing in it because I know how I am. I check out and I don't want to be that player. I don't want to do that to anybody at the table. And it can just cause tensions because it's like, why is nobody listening when I'm on scene? Why are my scenes not important? And it causes so much strife where if you add a camera, if you add a video, do it over Zoom or some other visual meeting sort of platform. At least you have somebody in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And you can do visual cues of, actually, I have something to say.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting to hear if somebody's done yet.
Yeah.
No, I played an audio-only game during the pandemic. Because when that happened, that was practically the only way to meet up and play. And a lot of people didn't have webcams at the time. Because... Well, we just didn't think we'd need those. Why would you use a webcam as often? And it was a struggle for multiple of our games.
Yeah.
I personally know I was running a campaign at the time, and we were not able to continue it because it was such a social intrigue focused game, and every time that we'd come up and play, we'd be in character at the table with it decorated the way it needs to be for that style, and everyone gets in that mindset. They're excited, and we're excited to see each other again because it's been a week. It's been another week since we've all been together. And then when suddenly you had that just turn to audio only, the energy, the excitement, the engagement was just completely away. And the thing is, it was no one's fault in particular.
It's just the platform.
Making sure that you're running the game at the right time and with the right medium, sometimes that is the importance.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing is audio only. See, and this might be a difference. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've got horror stories in the day before cable where our TV would go out and all I had was radio. But audio only, there's a huge welcome to go ahead and distance yourself from everything. You don't have to be as invested. You don't have to do this. But going back to the GM thing, you've got to put the energy out there for it.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, there was some of those nights when we were doing audio only that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And that's why we had this whole thing of like, so what do you guys do now aside from build a Walmart in the middle of nowhere because it's got a great distribution channel? And we went off on a tangent for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But had we had video, I don't think we would have done that.
Yeah.
But the ways to pick up on it if you're playing it, and audio can work, or at least I've been running one game for 6 months now that's audio only.
Yeah.
Mostly because it's with friends that I met through MMORPGs and they want to retain their anonymity.
I'm sure, yeah.
And I can respect that. So it's one of those bits of like, all right, cool. So we're doing audio only, but you listen to when the pauses happen. And you listen to basically, you can hear things in there. You have to listen for the size. You have to listen for basically the, as you're describing something, are they ready to go? And if so, what? And if you describe something, there's a, yeah, but, and then pause and go for that. So it's just kind of listening to all those verbal tells that you aren't there for.
Yeah.
And also, as a GM, you really have to put a lot more out there with audio.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it, though, when they give it back in an audio medium as well. Like I had basically a shaman character go ahead and dress down, outlaws that were ambushing her with this. I was expecting her to give an intimidation speech, but she gave me the "I'm not mad, just horribly disappointed" but if it was visual and I saw her face, it wouldn't have as much impact as me just hearing her vocal tone, because that just stuck with me with how she said that. I hope you're going to think about this as we take you back to the camp. You'll have at least 2 miles to walk behind us to think about how you betrayed the faith that everybody put into you.
Yeah.
It was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so those are the things that you can get from it.
Yeah.
It's easier to have it with video, but you can make audio work.
I think for me, honestly, like if I'm not playing in person, it's very hard for me because I'm definitely like high charisma energy vampire. Like
Oh, wow.
It is who I am. I will fully admit it. I am here to consume your energy. And so it's hard, and I can't do that over Discord or even over a video platform. It's hard for me to give back what you're giving me. For whatever reason, I think it's just a human thing, and a lot of ways.
Everybody's different.
Yeah. But I do think like there can be something as well for some folks that an audio only or over Zoom can be a little bit more freeing. They feel a little bit more willing to be a little bit more silly when they're just sitting basically at home by themselves. Yeah. And so they're just like, well, I'm not at a table with a bunch of people here. I'm just going to go off here. But I think, it is a double-edged sword, but one of those edges is pretty dull.
I like that.
That's a well said.
I think some real difficulty, because you started this game as an audio game.
Yeah,
you're saying
it did. It did start as an audio game.
I think there's a big advantage to that because it sets the expectation of how that game is going to. A lot of these people you haven't met in real life, so the only metric that you have to understand and recognize them is by their voice. So that has so much more weight, where I think it is more difficult when you have to scale back a game, and suddenly you're taking away levels that people really appreciated, that they were in tune with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back to role-playing here. So what are some TTRPG formats that you all can recommend for people who love role-playing?
I feel like I talk every beginning.
Go for it. No, do it again.
Kingdom. It is a very small little booklet. It is a role-play only game. People take on roles, you build up scenes, and it's GM-less. So everyone just builds their characters and then sets up scenes. There's a very small mechanic matrix, basically deciding who wins in a scene or whatnot, or what special power you might have during a session of play that might tip things in a different direction. But that was one of the best role-playing experiences I've ever had. It changed the caliber of when I returned back to playing something like D&D, which is the same that happened when you jump in a game like World of Darkness, where suddenly you've got this a storyteller-focused system. Burning Wheel would be the last one. I think that's the hardest game to learn and master, but once you get some attunement for it, there's no going back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know a bunch of little things. There's one that I can think of where you're playing like two people that are in love but like can't be together. I think it's like Monster or something or another. It's not Monster Hearts, but it's like a little game. I'll look it up and like put it in the comments when we post this. But for bigger systems, World of Darkness is great. I've played it a lot, and I think it lends itself really well to role playing. because it is more like socially, politically intrigue focused than like how many times can you punch a thing.
Yeah.
But also, if you want like really fun, sort of like panache, campy systems, 7C is great. Because it's not as deadly, and so it's really focused on like the setting and like drawing you into the setting. And the more a system can put you into the setting, the easier it is to roleplay.
Yeah.
If all you look at when you look at a system, if all you see are numbers and mechanics, then it's probably going to be a little bit harder to immerse yourself into that setting. And along those same veins, because it's, I think it's made by the same people that do 7C, Legend of the Five Rings.
Yes.
And I say this because they managed to do something that I've never seen done well, and that is implement an honor system. And so your character has a certain amount of honor. For those who don't know what Legend of the Five Rings is, you get to play samurai. It's like weeb stuff.
I thought it was a new Sonic movie. Okay.
No. And so it's based in like that sort of like Kurosawa samurai era kind of setting, and honor is really important to your character. And I think what they've done with it is just so amazing, because it's not just numbers on a page. It will inform the decisions that you make in the next session, because you're always thinking about it. Because honor is tied to a bunch of different mechanics that you might be able to do or then lose and not do anymore based on that honor rank. And so you're actively thinking about it like, will this lose me honor? Will this gain me honor? How much honor will I lose if I commit this act? Not worth it. I'm going to bite my tongue and like...
Yeah.
Like it's so much fun, and I've never seen a system do it quite so eloquently.
That's very like Mass Effect-y.
Yes.
In terms of yeah.
Honestly, I think you're gonna have to hit eBay for this one, but the Amber Diceless role-playing game. It was experimental.
Sorry, I thought you were telling me to go on eBay and do role playing.
Yeah, go on eBay.
But the Amber, it was based on Roger Zelazny's Amber books. It was really experimental. I didn't quite get it at the time it came out, but it's entirely, the GM is more of a moderator. And it's up to you to tell the story of everything else with this. I mean, they have a plot that you're going to go through, but everything else is open world for you, because your character is one of these princes or princesses of Amber that can manipulate reality, so you can go anywhere you want to, do anything you want to, but... So that's already, so basically what you can and can't do is already taken off the table.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this, how well can you narrate your bit of the story with this? And how can you resolve conflict by basically, what are you going to give up to get this resolution? Or what are you going, it's really brain hurty to play. But with the right group, it can be incredibly good. You're going to need a bunch of high-end role players for that, high-acting role players. A little bit more simple is Savage Worlds, because while there is a strong combat element to it, it's a system that rewards things like tricking an opponent, taunting an opponent, intimidating an opponent. So if you have those great lines, just basically assume the player's already got a raise. Being able to hand out mechanisms called bennies, which basically let you make dice re-rolls, or you can change your environment, which is you're fighting in a lab. What's the chance that I can actually have a bottle of hydrochloric acid right at hand? Well, right at hand, give me a benny, and you have it. So it gives the player a lot of narrative control over the scene, over what their character can do, and it also rewards them for basically making these chances on character. And also, I give bennies out if characters choose to fail something, because that makes sense. It's like, I wouldn't know this, but I'm going to go ahead and hit the lock with a fire axe and see if that actually opens it. It doesn't.
That's why I ended up with so many bennies.
Okay. But those are choices that you made as a player that actually furthered your character. And so there's a mechanism in that for me as a GM to reward that. And that's what I kind of like about it.
I love that. As a player, I actually love failure. I love it. I think it's...
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, please. Please do. I'm totally... I have died in so many one-shots. I have failed at things constantly because I like character growth. I like being put up against something and learning the limits of my character and who they are, and them having to have a moment of learning what their limits are. And I think we have done that a little bit with Sable in their benching party is like what are your limits? What are the limits of your philosophy? What are the limits of the way you see the world? And so I think that you actually have done a good job at failure in not a specific sense of like combat failure, but like in a philosophical sense of.
I've done everything I can to make you losers and have fun doing it.
Yeah, we are losers. That's actually very true. That's the whole premise of the game. I actually would like to recommend a video game, Disco Elysium.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, it's just their mechanics and the way they create role playing within the game is just one of the most unique versions of that I've ever seen. And I actually think, I don't know if there is a role playing game based off of it yet, but I think there either is going to be or is a one that Zayam has made. It's Zayam. And I would be totally down to engage with that more. But the world that's there, the mechanics that they have, I mean, I believe it's a 2d6 based system. And man, is it ever weird when your when your characteristics talk to you?
That blew my mind.
I just
saw that.
The thing that broke me the most as a TTRPG player was when my mechanics would talk to me and they would lie to me. Like, your strength would be like, you can beat this guy up, and I'd be like, yes I can. No, you can't. This guy, you can scroll up and read. This guy is like a head over you and twice as the width of you. Yeah. You can't beat him, but your strength says you can. So I think that's just a really creative way, and I don't know what a TTRPG version of that would be. I think it would take a very creative DM to because they'd have to play your stats, right? They'd have to be the one who's like, yeah, so your stat here is telling you, yeah, you can do this. You got
It's called Derangements in World of Darkness.
Oh, yeah.
It's going crazy.
I mean, isn't there a game called Everybody's Bob or something?
I don't know.
I think that might be the title of it, but it's all players are playing different voices inside of one physical person's head. So it's kind of the opposite of that.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, might be looking.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Did we have any other commentary on that? Okay, cool. We will jump on to the last couple questions here. Okay, so how do you use how do you use role playing as a tool for storytelling?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how do you incorporate it in? So I think more. So here, in terms of like whether it is or not, I mean it is obviously, but so you as a DM have a story you're trying to tell, correct? Your characters have a certain expectation of what that story is going to be, that they're going to each bring to the table. How do you combine role-playing in order to both give them satisfaction for the actions that they're taking and also help to push them and guide them into a specific or, maybe a couple of different arenas?
One of the major things I do is give my NPCs, especially the big bad guys, incomplete information. I have it so that they just like a player entering into a situation where they're stepping in. They don't know exactly where the danger is, who built this, why it's here, why a staff is exploding in the middle of the room, sending fire out from it. But the NPCs don't know that either. And most of the time, by making the guess that that the party's enemies aren't omniscient, that they're not all knowing, changes the role play immensely. Because once their characters recognize that, their enemies are just as confused as they are, then every single time that's happened, it's completely changed the trajectory of a campaign. By having them enter in their role play and having the opposite go, interesting. I'm used to people coming up and trying to stab me with a sword because I'm the bad guy. But you're wanting to talk?
Yeah.
Let's talk.
I feel like that's that moment of realizing the NPCs don't know is like everything is like this equivalent to realizing that your parents are just people.
Yeah, which is also very scary.
Yeah, it's very scary.
Oh God, nobody knows what's going on ever. Oh no.
Yeah. I guess It's really difficult for me to like answer the question because I play mostly like role play heavy games.
Yeah.
And so most of the story is role play.
Yeah.
And so it's already incorporated into everything that we're doing. Specifically, I try and keep in mind their interactions with NPCs and how those NPCs later feel about the characters, because then that could become really, really important information in, let's say, a big combat when they're trying to gather allies.
Yeah.
And then I have to look back on those role-playing scenes where I was like, okay, well, what were the choices that they made during those role-playing scenes? Like, how did they decide to approach this NPC? Did it leave a positive or negative light on the, or like impression on that NPC? And how does that inform what they're doing now? Because NPCs, just like PCs, should have character growth.
Mm.
They shouldn't be static.
Yeah.
And that's gonna make your world feel even more immersive. If the things that the characters that your PCs are doing to the NPCs change their mind or like endear them to the even if it's not anything super like life-changing that an NPC, but if they have a lot of positive little interactions here and there, like they say hi to the same NPC at the coffee shop every morning,
Yeah.
that's like an endearing thing, you know? And so just like keeping in mind all of those decisions outside of the big plot,
Yeah.
I think is really important.
Gosh, you said that so much better than me.
Sorry.
You really did.
No, and I think that's also a really, it's an incredible space where TTRPGs can absolutely outclass video games in that sense, because you can be, in a video game, everything always has to be planned, you know, and in a TTRPG, you can all of a sudden get rewarded for just being like, you know what, I'm gonna stop and, you know, give that street urchin some money. And it can completely branch off into something that did not exist before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there was never a question that TTRPGs were better than a computer game. I mean, even the most moments that have actually made me cry in a computer game have actually been because they're in my head, because I'm role-playing my character more than the game gives me out.
Yeah.
Sometime I'll go off on tangent about like playing a secret world and doing everything from getting really, really angry that I have to walk away and punch something to actually breaking down going, wow, these are my horrible life choices. But that, again, don't drink while playing video games. I think might be But your question, I'm still baffled with that one, because it's almost like the human resources question of like, so why is green? But it's not so much a tool as it is basically the reason we're playing it.
Yeah.
It's the gravity of the game for it. I mean, you know, saying basically, I don't play a role play. I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons because there was too much role playing is sort of like saying I broke the lease to move to a different apartment because there was gravity in my previous one. I mean, it's something that needs to be there.
Yeah.
If it's not, you've kind of like removed the purpose for why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's basically rolling dice and looking at numbers and saying I kill it, and it removes that aspect for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a vital and necessary part of it. It's why we actually spend hours a week basically going, what are we going to do with this? I'm wondering if there was a deeper question you wanted to ask me on that, or if I'm...
No, I am just realizing that the two of you really just wanted to say, what a stupid forking question.
I think basically there's a deeper question on that, which is...
Exactly.
I didn't want to say that.
Oh, sorry, he's included. I didn't include him.
No, I think it's a good thing to bring up, because
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a bad reputation for people who play Dungeons and Dragons just want to do dungeon crawls, right?
Oh, raw.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
They want to start out in the dungeon, and they have 6 character backups for when they die.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want to play, that's fine. Yeah. But in my opinion, a video game does that way better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I think people have figured that out, especially with like video games becoming what they are now. Like, you have so many options of like great video games that can mimic that so much better than Dungeons and Dragons. And so there's more people are starting to realize that it is a choked on my spit. I'm getting all choked up. It's a collective storytelling game, you guys. It's beautiful.
It's okay. It's a community.
Yeah.
But no, it's...
Yeah, I think the heart of their question really more is, I know it's basically the broad question of what is role playing, but like I think that as a DM or as a GM or even as a player, role playing can feel like it is. Yes, it is an essential ingredient to the game, but how do you utilize it, right, to create narrative? I think is really where I'm getting at. Because you can sit there and you can banter back and forth forever with an NPC. But how do you take that role playing that you're doing, like Bree said, and like taking that interaction that you have with the person who you say hi to get coffee with every morning, and instead of that just being like a thing that's there, how do you make that now something that integrates into something that makes a more satisfying world, a more satisfying narrative?
And that's actually the constant challenge of a GM.
Yeah. You have to remember a lot.
Yeah, and also you've got to actually keep pushing a lot on it. When you were describing that, I remembered from the documentary about advertising, art, and copy. There's a story about George Lois, who was basically a creative director and designer in the 70s, 80s, I think up until the 90s, where he was at a conference and they were asking him, so what's advertising? And the peer next to him was talking about marketing and numbers, and Lois was giving these disapproving looks, and they say, well, George, is this guy wrong? He's like, no, we must be in two different industries, because he deals with numbers, I deal with poison gas. As in, if you watch an ad, you should have some sort of emotional reaction. You should have some sort of visceral reaction. Yeah. As a GM, you're in that same seat because if you're doing your job, if you're telling a story, you've got to figure out how to go ahead and reach your players they'll have that sort of reaction.
Yeah.
That they'll actually want to embrace and play up with you on that.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've had like a fantastic number of players at my table. Pretty much everybody but Bree, but that's going to be fixed soon. Has basically done that. That you'll go ahead and give something back with it. It's almost a rebound effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with a question, kind of free one. What was a favorite role-playing moment that each of you remember?
Oh. Could it be role-playing the same character like 15 times without people knowing?
Yes.
So I played a human rogue. That's how he started. Who was supposed to be basically like a master of disguise. So I played him off as a spy and everything. The first game, I think it ran for a handful of sessions because we were completing an adventure. And it was kind of a fun character, except the issue is that I built him to be very antagonistic. So mechanically, almost everything he did was push other players in the way of when he's about to get stabbed. Gain bonuses by making small conditional problems around the map. But then, with my roleplay, what I was able to do is make myself so engaged and so core to the story that even though people were frustrated by how this character worked, man, they were glad to have him.
You had to respect that.
Yeah. And the best thing is that because he was a spy, I played him multiple times because I would simply always have my character in a character sheet in a folder. So he was a master spy, so I'd start off another campaign, get the GM's permission, and they're like, hey, you can go ahead and play the same character. It's not an issue for me. Except then start off by role playing. No, I'm the orc fighter, and I've got this sword, and that's really what I care about. And then we get to combat, and suddenly I drop my heavy sword, and I'm pulling a small dagger, and causing scenes. People are going, what is this character doing? He's not acting anything like himself. And then they'd catch on pretty quickly that I was playing my same spy. And that was always the best payoff from other players, is just their reaction, knowing that once again I'm caught, but also I was able to get along by role-playing the character in such a different way. That they wouldn't notice them to start.
Absolutely.
I mean, I have so many things that are coming to mind, but I think one of my favorite characters to play in roleplay was my bard sorcerer Marina. She was in a Pathfinder game, and she was I wanted to make a bard that was the opposite of like what everybody thought of. So she was beautiful. She was just like so drop dead gorgeous, but she was asexual and only interested in power and food. And she was a biatch. And she was the epitome of I would sell you to Satan for one corn chip.
No, man. Yep.
And just like sort of the repeated interactions that would happen with the party where they're all like your typical we're fighting for good, and she would have to step in and be like, and also money. We are getting paid to do this. And she ended up striking a deal with one of the devils that we fought at the beginning of the game. And part of the deal was creating more physical tethers to the physical plane for the devil. And I had a little family of tieflings. And we always joked that the devil was the more compassionate parent than Marina.
Oh my goodness.
So just that character overall made so many fun role-playing moments because of the I would sell you to Satan for one corn chip.
Yeah.
Man. I have to dig deep because I GM a lot more than I do play. But there's another. Was it again my surly Captain America character? There was one where this Ultron-like robot had taken over this nuclear reactor and was going to detonate it, and we were coordinating with 2 other NPC hero teams. So it's like we have our plan of attack, and then we have to go to this underground. The underground storage facility where the reactor is itself. And, the people with rocket packs fly, the people with magic powers fly, the people with everything fly. My character runs fast. So I go to the elevator, press the button, and we wait. And since it's champions, you have to kick down the speed charts, and it's measured in 3-second intervals. So it's like, all right, so interval 2, flag, what are you doing? Waiting. Okay, interval 4, flag, is it here yet? It's time for a cigarette. And then when we got on, everyone gets down there, and the mechanical robot goes ahead and gives its whole thing of like, fools, you will now all die. See my glory and despair as it brings out, was it a previously dead Iron Man character now reanimated in this cybernetic husk that it's made. Meanwhile, okay, it's here. And so as the GM would go around for each turn, it's like, all right, so what do you do? I dodge. What do you do? I do this. Flag, what do you do? All right, what else? My mental powers are no use against him. I'll put up a parcel.
That feels very like a Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
It was, but it was a cool bit of like a cool dichotomy for it because it worked with the GM. It didn't really undercut his drama because here's this death duel that's probably going to blow up this area.
Yeah.
And
well, you're gonna come in late, and you're gonna be everybody's gonna be like half HP down, and like have all this stuff, and you're gonna come in fresh, like
you get the Gandalf.
Right, let's do it. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I was I think was it with me? I didn't know it was a mechanokinetic. And what was the other one? Some of them could do teleportation because they were the ones that could, or she could teleport other things but not herself.
Oh.
So basically, it was an attack power. So that was the 3 of us that were there. It's like, yeah, they all went like, all right, so what do we do? All right. But that was the fun bit.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I'm gonna say 3 of them. Playing ETU with you, it was amazing. Getting to actually RP a queer relationship for the first time in my life was really great, and somewhat therapeutic for me. It was quite lovely, and Charlie did a wonderful job at handling that. And watching the end of your Call of Cthulhu game was some of the best RP I've ever watched.
Oh, those guys were amazing.
It was incredible, and you facilitated just an incredible game there.
Indeed.
And there are very few times where I just like am locked in while working a stream, and I was locked in on that.
I had the story, but I had great players, and that's a great example of just stepping back and letting your players shine, letting the moment happen.
It was so beautiful. And my third one would actually be last week on Yop. It was a great moment. We all had this moment of admitting having to admit kind of our deep dark secret. And mine was a very serious one that I felt a little bit, even almost a little bit choked up on. And Dominic's was a very serious one. And then we get to Alex, and he hit us with the I don't know my right from left.
Yep.
And it didn't undercut the moment at all because it was exactly what his character would say.
Yeah.
And we also had Lex afterwards come back and come over to me and reassure me that it was okay. The admission I had made, it was okay, right?
Yeah.
And it was a really beautiful moment for creating these character connections that now these characters really do feel like they've now added something to each other's lives. And I thought that was an incredible moment. I think that's a space that is wonderful to create. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Casey.
Well, thank you. I don't think I've ever had a moment quite like that in a game.
It was so great.
So
yeah.
And I'm gonna have to go and watch it.
It was great. It was the first time I think I've actually heard while we're playing Yop the other room just go, ah! Because it was so off guard. In any case, you can actually catch Yop every other Sunday on this channel. You can catch Collide on the opposite Sundays. You will be able to catch some of Charlie's games starting in May. I don't know when this episode is going to air yet, so it might be running concurrently with
Might
this
go have to check right now.
Yeah, you go.
Run.
And you can check out all of our other content as well. We have a Discord that you can join, and you can ask our DMs questions. You can also engage with Collide. And we also are developing something for Yop that you will be able to engage with that might be somewhat similar to how Bree described the separate role-playing sessions. So keep an eye out for that. And that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Check out our Instagram. Please like and subscribe. And that is a wrap for this one.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
It was fun. Thank you a lot.
Yeah,
Learned a
it
lot.
was so great having you.